jag sa tinich to cut you on. And how before we start, we're going to start our beginning Tlingit review. This evening, the goal is spending these first 2 weeks or so moving through that whole workbook. So again, if you go to tlingitlanguage.com, and then there's a tab there for learning Tlingit. Under that tab, there's a tab for intermediate Tlingit, and that has a link to the workbook that we're going to work off of. You can certainly watch it on the screen, as it'll be on the screen as we move through it. Then I'll stop the screen sharing if there's any questions or if we need to sort of explain a few things. The next couple of weeks, I'm going to experiment with another camera, so maybe I can try writing things. I don't think you'll see the chalkboard. If I need to write things, I might try it on dry erase board, or I might just give it up entirely and just use the computer, which is probably my preference. We're experimenting with how we sit in the room and how that looks for you, Han, who are online. And so before we get going, we get one new face so far. You want to introduce yourself?
My name is DeAndre King, Gaio. That's my Tlingit name from here.
Okay. Tupkinton again?
Tupkinton.
Can you say your name again?
Gaio.
Okay. Okay. Anybody got anything on your mind? Any questions before we get started? Thoughts? Anything you want to share?
For my allegory class, I am in the works of creating a mock prison on campus with fake prison bars, and I am looking for people who would be interested in performing the roles of guards. So, just let me know. Cool.
How much?
Pure psychology.
Yeah. There's going to be rules, obviously. It's not going to be the Stanford Prison Project. We will beat people up, but what I need is people just to like ask basic questions, like show me your ID as they're walking through the door, and if they don't, you're going to have to be like, well, I'll let you through this time, but don't tell anyone. You know, that kind of stuff.
I can't bring my drill sergeant hand.
Oh, you can if you want. Please do.
Anybody else?
Reading the beginning to the intro to Hakusti, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, that is that's one that's
Talks about the education system.
Yeah.
And the colonial eras, you know, from going from Russian Orthodox to the American period.
And that introduction to Hakusti, which was written by Richard Dowenhauer, he later published as a separate document.
What's it called?
Something, Alaska education.
Yeah, it's
conflicting
views in
Alaskan education.
Yeah, something like that.
It's wonderful. Yeah, I had an updated version just I think a year or so ago. I had a box.
There's something in the language lab.
Okay.
Or at least one.
Maybe I can read it if I get swipe access.
That'll happen. We do online. We have a language lab upstairs. Which someday we'll have use. So I'll compose the email very.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you after class about that.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Yeah.
One more thing. So last week I was not very articulate, but this was the doll, and I called her Eskimo, but this was my standard of beauty my whole childhood, not princesses and things. This is the infamous doll that I was trying to describe. She was probably from a tourist shop downtown or something, but this is who I was talking about. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay. Anything else?
Chane.
That's the way.
Taking yesterday or last Thursday. One of the things that I kind of had a question about was words when they're back to back together, do the sounds blend together, or are they quite distinguishably different? For example, like Deshitan nach city,
Sure.
when they blend together.
So if you're doing nach chatzati, it depends on its. I think the ringing never really stops in the back of your throat, so it's not like you go nach chatzati, although some people can. But I think as you're sort of thinking about Tlingit fluency, nach chatzati. So generally, I would say there is a lot of word separation in Tlingit. So if you've got one word here and another word here, there's going to be some pretty distinct differences. For example, in Hawaiian, if a word ends with a vowel and the next word starts with a vowel, they'll just run right into each other. You'll have a distinct accent if you stop them. And so you'll be corrected for that. The exception for Tlingit has to do with verbs, because verbs, when we get contraction in Tlingit, there are two places we really get contraction. One is when nouns become compound nouns, and two is with verbs, and especially in the prefix of the verb itself. So if there is an open vowel in the word before the verb, it'll often run right into the verb itself. And we'll keep an eye out for some examples. But one would be Gao it yan chagut. So you could say yan chagut, and it sounds like that's one word, but that's actually two words. Ya and then chagut. But the ya is running into the na, and there's some contraction going on there. And we'll look at verbs as we encounter more verbs. We'll find out where that contraction is happening. We'll start to get an idea of the rules behind it. But yeah, that's a good question. A lot of times, and really just listen to speakers in your area, listen to different speakers of recordings, and we've got recordings where we've got the written Tlingit already, so you can sort of read it and see the differences in how you would pronounce it reading it off the page as a learner, and how the fluent speaker is saying it as they're pulling the language out of their mind. So usually if the sounds like something ends with an underline X and starts with an underline X, they tend to run together. But other than that, you usually have quite a bit of separation.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Okay, so we're going to have an order to the way that we do our drills in here, and I think it might change from time to time. But what I'm going to propose for today is that first we'll do sound practice. I say it, y'all repeat. Okay, and then we'll just sort of go. And there's not really a set number of times that I would do this. Sometimes if we're a little bit further in our studies and we decided to do sound practice, if I'm hearing a sound incorrectly, I might continue to repeat that sound. And then when we get to the nouns, what I want to do today when we're practicing nouns and practicing learning and some phrases that we're reviewing, is I'll say it, and then we'll just send it around the room and everybody repeats it. If there was a phrase and somebody said it and didn't quite say it correctly, I might repeat it after them. But otherwise, we'll just go. And so the order will be, we'll go along this table, then we'll jump into in the internet, and then we'll continue along this side of the table. And on the internet, I see Kuwuch, Terrell, and Tukaha. So that's the order of how we're going to do things. Any questions? Feel free to ask questions as we go. We're also going to be breaking down some of the language. And now that we're getting ready to move into our drills, those of you who are thinking about teaching Tlingit in the future, you should know that there's lots of different techniques when it comes to teaching languages. And you just sort of find what works for you as a learner and also as a teacher. And as you deal with learners and as you deal with certain situations, And there's a number of different techniques that are out there. There's continuing to develop new techniques as we go along. I would say always make sure that you understand the fundamentals of the language and make sure that you are teaching to that. But then you also need lots of drills just to sort of break things up and to have fun with the language as well. TPR is a big thing. What's TPR stand for?
Total physical response. Is that what it stands for?
Yeah, total physical response. And so it's based on getting people, my understanding is that the primary philosophy is getting people to hear a lot more language than they are saying, and to do a lot of visualizing so that people could see exactly what it is. And so I would say stand up, and then we would all stand up, or I'd say sit down, we'd all sit down. I might use plural and singular versions. And it sort of progresses from there to use a lot of things where one of the ideas is that your body is always doing something, you're not always just sitting down, but that you're internalizing language through movement, which can get a great deal of success. For Tlingit, one of the critiques of the TPR methodology is that you're using a lot of command form verbs, which culturally can be inappropriate if you're just kind of commanding people to do things all the time. Although you do a lot in a language class that you wouldn't normally do. We always try to sort of explain how those things function. We talk differently in a language class than we do outside at times. And then a number of other methods that I have experienced or seen people use. Where are your keys is a method. One of the fundamental things of that is it uses sign language in addition to language learning so that it's easier to stay in the target language, using a series of signs that are designed, and also activities and games that keep the language flowing. There's certainly a number of other methods. There's the gray morning method. There's other things like that. But I'll tell you what sort of my approach is as we go forward. So the first thing we do is we just get introduced to the sounds of Tlingit. And we go through all the sounds that there are. There's a lot. I think there's 45 or so. In Hawaiian, there's 11. I mean, you don't deal with sound practice that much in Hawaiian. You deal with like vowels and making sure you're getting the vowels correctly, but probably not as much drilling some sounds that are unusual to monolingual English.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to see if, like, I'm trying to get into that point just in case, or trying to get into it right now. I just wasn't sure how you get into the group by chance.
Let's see.
Sorry to go off course here for a second.
It's okay. Let me see if we're... Oh. It might work. It might. I think it might not necessarily. This one's you here? Okay, we'll try it. We'll see if that works. Make sure that you mute it, or else you're going to throw us into a loop. Okay. So coming back, so we focus on pronunciation. Say, here's what these sounds look like, and we'll look at that letter as well. When you see that letter, that is the sound that it makes. It might be a combination of letters. And then from there, we start learning nouns, which in Tlingit is the name of something. And then we start learning some basic phrases where we can fill in the blanks. After a while, we start introducing some verbs. And then we start learning more and more phrases. And some of those phrases are focusing on how to express ourselves. We pick up what are called interjections, which is like, holy cow, good grief, things like that. But in Tlingit, we talk about how they function, and then we start looking at more phrases, more nouns, and then we start talking about how verbs function, and then we start unpacking all the rest. So it's more probably of a grammatical and structural approach than anything. and then we start breaking down the different phases of the language and how they work. Tlingit is what we call a polysynthetic language, which means it's made up of a bunch of little components that you can smash together. And there's a lot of languages that are like that. There's a lot of North American native languages that are like that. And if you look at how Tlingit puts compound nouns together and how it puts verbs together, and we're going to reveal all that stuff, and we're going to see all these different components that go in there. We're going to talk a lot this semester about classifiers and conjugation. One of the more mysterious things is how the verb works from there. And then we'll always focus on Tlingit that's spoken from fluent elders so that we can see how they think and how they put their sentences together. So that eventually our goal is to interpret and to be able to understand a lot of Tlingit, to be able to start putting sentences together, and then to be able to start thinking in Tlingit so that we say, well, how would a fluent speaker 50 years ago think about this type of concept? And one of the important things is we're also, the language it's a modern language, right? We speak a modern language. It's not it's old. It's way older than English. But you can talk about anything you want in Tlingit. There are certain things that would be very challenging to say because you don't think about things in the same way in Tlingit as you do in English. Yeah. All right, here we go. It's enough of the overall big lecture, but stop anytime you want if you have some questions about how things are functioning. We're going to move out of English into Tlingit. So I'm going to screen share with you guys. This is what we're looking at here. This is based on beginning Tlingit. It's gone through several variations. I taught this in Carcross, in Teslin, in Whitehorse, here in Juneau, and it's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of feedback from students, from speakers, from other teachers to try and put this together. So one of the things that I do try to do with a workbook like this is to try to minimize the use of English as we move forward and to use a lot of pictures and illustrations and things like that. There's a running list of people that I know of who've been teaching and working actively in the language. There's probably more than this, but I wanted to acknowledge a lot of the people that influenced me in my life. Okay, and then we're going to add to this semester. We're going to finish this thing so that we go all the way through chapter 9 of beginning Tlingit, where we're starting to conjugate a lot of verbs. And some of the verbs we start with are going to be very straightforward verbs as far as how they function. We'll talk about what that means later. Okay. And there's also quotes in here that are just really what I feel are really amazing things in Tlingit, both in terms of the concept and also linguistically, some of the things that are going on. So here we go. Tlingit is not the same as English. I remember somebody said, hey, you should have a camera like right in front of your face so that people can see what your face does when you make these sounds. And I said, well, I think the hardest job in the universe would be a Tlingit lip reader because you don't use your lips. Right? So English, it's all in the front of the mouth. If you pay attention to where you're making these sounds when you speak English, like if you're to hold your lips open, it would be really hard to speak English. But you can do that with Tlingit. It might be a little weird, but it won't be nearly as weird as in English. So looking at this chart, we've got vowels. Remember that vowels go short, long, high, and low. This O sound is more common in the interior than it is on the coast. We'll talk about dialects. There are, if I know of a different way that's said in a different area, I'll mention that. But otherwise, we're using the Greater Northern dialect And if you find out that this particular word is said different in your community, please let me know, and also definitely go with your region. Okay, so I didn't put that in. I should put this information in here. How many dialects are there in Tlingit? I guess what are they? Anybody know?
Tongass, transitional.
Tongass, transitional, southern. Right.
Interior.
Oh yeah. So yes, and so when we look at the dialect structure, and let me actually pull this chart up, and we'll look at this chart for a second, just to type how Tlingit works. And this comes from. Wait, let me find. If I talk and look at the same time, it's not going to make any sense. This comes from James Crippen. So now, I can see that I can switch to this thing. Oh, can you guys see this online? Okay, sheesh. All right, so what we're dealing with here's Tlingit, Tongass, Southern, Northern. Yehwaji Ishuhwa Shingityu Katangi away. Tongass. And Tongass, that word does not come from Tlingit. Its origins are, I believe.
Yeah, I think it comes from Tongass.
Yep. So it's not even a Tlingit word. But this is a dialect that was spoken around the sort of Saxman and Ketchikan area. There are no Tongass speakers left. The last speakers of the Tongass dialect died in the 1980s. There's recorded Tongass, Frank and Emma Williams. You can hear it through the Alaska Native Language Archive if you want to hear what Tongass Tlingit sounds like. But this was probably the very first Tlingit, was Tongass Tlingit. And we say that, I've had conversations with Zeus about this, because there's a lot of different rules in Tlingit as far as when you put sounds together that don't make sense unless you look at how Tongass functions. It gets those rules from Tongass, and so Tongass has no tone. So this first layer of dialect has to do with tone, right? So when we deal with vowels, we know we have 4 options: short and high, short and low, long and high, long and low. Those are our 4 possibilities for a vowel, right? And it's sort of like you have one particular vowel, and it could be those 4 variations. It's good to think of it that way. And we'll talk about these particular vowels and how they're grouped. So that is Greater Northern Tlingit, has those. When we get into especially Southern Tlingit, what we have is we have short and high, short and low, long and fading, and long and, or not fading, but there's a long and high, but it goes up and it comes back down. So for example, we'd say, everybody say, heen, 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 heen. And in true Southern dialect Tlingit, you go, heen. So it would go up, and it would come back down. Heen. Right? And so this is one of the big things that makes the first rule of Tlingit dialects is how do you handle tone? Because Tongass does not have high tone. Right? So that it would say like hitten. It would be 2 eyes, and that's how it would do. And so that's the first thing. And then we've got Sanya and Haina. This is sort of the Wrangell, Petersburg area. Haina is Prince of Wales. Then you have transitional. And transitional, I would probably say, is more closely related to Gulf Coast and inland. And this has to do with an EI spelling, which is A, like sock, echi, right? So let's say hul for hooligan greets. And in a lot of our southern and some of our transitional communities like Angoon, Cake, Gulf Coast is Yakutat area, Dry Bay, inland, and especially we're talking about Teslin. Some of the rural, and also some of the speakers, a lot of the speakers in Carcross, some of the speakers in Etlin, but especially for Teslin. And here you would say Sak, E. So the A switches to E. Not in all cases, but in quite a few. So you'd say Yungayuane, are y'all ready? And if you were in the transitional community, Yungayuane. And there's a few other things that make these dialects different. And so, but you can learn these different rules, and then you should learn whatever dialect works for the area that you're from. The majority of the speakers speak Greater Northern Tlingit. A lot of the works that we study are in Northern Tlingit. Although there's lots of speakers who are documented in Angoon, so you're going to get this transitional Tlingit. Lots of speakers documented in Yakutat, so you get that as well. And there's a lot of speakers still in Teslin, and they were documented in Teslin, so you get that there. Okay, back to the
How does that work for clan names that are found in different dialect people? If like the NAD would be Kaini, AAD.
Well, NAD is a contraction of T, Heen, Ati. So that's the case. Like you wouldn't say take, and you wouldn't say Heen.
Oh, you wouldn't?
Right, no. And so it's not, with that substitution, it's not for everyone.
I thought I've seen it as NAD.
Okay. There's INAD, which is a word for all the Raven clans. But usually it should be NAD.
Even in the down powers where they have it as either or.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I have to investigate it. Yeah, but and so in certain clan names, you go with the region you go with what the clan says. And although there are perhaps exceptions, if people are speaking less and less Tlingit, then sometimes, because there's Kukitan and Kukitan. Those are two different clans, one's Raven, one's Eagle. And so the danger is that they both become Kukitan, where there's no underlying guttural K in there. Or if you go inland, a lot of speakers will say Kukitan. And then Kokitan, so we've got a vowel shift to the O. I think that's more manageable than dropping both of them, or at least one of the underlying Ks. Because Kuk, that's the way Kuk, or box, that's the way Kuk. Pit or a cellar.
Food cellar?
Yeah, it's a food cellar. So, and we'll go over these different clan names. You should know clan. You should know them all. You should know them all. And then you should, if somebody says, you should know whether or not you marry that person or whatever. You should know, right? Like, wait a minute, eligible? No, but you should know, like, because the kinship structure needs to come into play. So once we, because sometimes if we lose the kinship structure, then everybody's our chuni. Right? What's the way chuni? But your chuni should be on the same moiety, right? Or else they're your kani. So these are some things we'll talk about as well. Cultural perspective of Tlingit, the dialect. There's Kuchanadi is a clan. Kuch, for every Tlingit outside of Prince of Wales, it's a Martin. Nukshiyan or Shukshiyan is a mink. For a lot of speakers on Prince of Wales, Kuch is a mink. And the Kuchanadi are from Prince of Wales. So they say the people of the mink house, you just say, yes, people of the mink house. Right? And so these are, and you'll get this as well as far as dialects, is some will say Kuwakan, some will say Kuwakan. Those are manageable. And other places they'll say, oh, well, we don't call that, we call it something else. Right? So sometimes it's a simple sound switch, but sometimes it's a different word for the same thing. One example is it was explained to me that Tessin speakers, am I going to get it right? Yak is a boat. Seat is a canoe.
There was another word that I saw specifically for a dugout.
Seat is a dugout canoe.
Okay.
So this is the other, like when we get to place names, there's a sitka, there's seatka, there's seatku, and then there's shietika, which often contracts to sheetika. So when people want to say, well, what's Sitka mean? They're like, oh, it's on the glacier. Oh, it's the dugout canoe cove. Oh, it's people on the outside of this island called Shi. So it gets really, and Taku is another one. So place names, and then in addition, place names, there's just this thing where like people want a big, awesome story, and sometimes there isn't, sometimes there is. But then, you know, like Skagway probably has 12 different interpretations, and I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think most of them are wrong.
Sorry, just kind of slightly off, but wasn't there like which story came from that cracked glacier? Was it where like two shamans fought there and it broke the glacier in half?
Which one? The Taku?
Was it Taku? I was trying to figure out like where it came from, that story.
Which story?
The one where.
Oh, the two shamans are fighting on.
Yeah,
I don't know that
Clash
story.
But,
I know.
because I mean, I heard David Katz talk about it when he went off on like the whole story behind shamans, being the battle generals and stuff, being able to talk to each other, being hundreds of miles away and stuff.
Yeah, they could do a lot in battles.
Yeah.
Everybody say ich. 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 To make a tangent off of the tangent. I'm always fine with tangents. I'd like you guys to find, we're going to try this time. Don't spend a lot of money, but find a little dry erase board with a little marker. Because we're going to practice lots of spelling, we're going to draw some pictures, we're going to do stuff like that. I think it's an easy way to just sort of show your work and then also erase it, make changes. What's up with Dudley spell? Yeah. What Dudley spell is a verb that uses English.
I-X-T.
Icht. I-X-T. Apostrophe. Oh. Okay, we got to do one letter at a time or else we're just going to go crazy.
Just regular.
Yeah. It's a high tone to I tone. Underline pinch T. There we go. And I think one of my goals over this year is to come up with Tlingit terms for these letters. Because they've got that when I'm learning Hawaiian, and our teacher is like, "This is a literate language," and he's always hollering at us. But then they've got, you can say, they've even for the Okina is their upside down or inverted apostrophe. They've got names for like we need a name for the underline. We need a name for the apostrophe.
Kind of like how Russians have that weird, like Tereznak. That's like for just one of their random little hyphens.
Yeah, so we'll come up with names, not necessarily us. I'll work with some elders, and then I'll tell you what these names are. Okay. We have no agency. And we'll also want to come up with grammatical terms for Tlingit grammar. So we talk about classifiers, well as stuff. We don't have to jump to English as we do it.
Let's hold those underlined fellows. Because it just sounded catchy.
Yeah. And I don't know that story. I know the two ladies that go under the glacier, they're done the Wadey, that's on the Shtachin. I know a guy who kills his female slave on top of a glacier, and that's a Taku. Drags her all around, and then the blood melts. So blood melts glaciers. Yeah. Something.
So like there's a lot of quotes like that.
Okay.
I mean, I just kind of just came to my head when I heard about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not very big, or just this place named after the battle. Two shamans like, I want to see this place.
There probably are places like there were places where they used to get together and sort of see who's the most powerful, and so the place names, they reveal a lot about And we'll look at some place themes in some different areas. Like what I'll do is at some point in the semester, we'll take a break from our curriculum, and then we'll just go over some place names of the places where you guys are from.
Oh, I thought you were talking like woods or something, you know, like kind of describe going through the woods or something.
Oh, like going out?
Like, yeah, telling directions, yeah, like you gotta go down the street, you know, cross it.
We will go over Tlingit directions, like how Tlingit directions work.
Yeah.
Really complicated.
Well, they're similar. You're either going inland or you're going to the ocean.
And it sounds the same.
Right. It's all about center point, your focal point of the Tlingit universe. That's where the ocean meets the shore. That's where Raven was born.
That's where
It's in the low tide line. Raven was born out of the low tide. So we're tidal people, even if we're inland, we're tidal people, and we'll talk about how all that stuff works as well. For now, back to we're on page 3. It's okay. We're just getting started. So let's just do some vowels. So we're going to start over here. We're going to go back and forth. So you see how this is the line? You could sort of think of that as one set of vowels. These are related. There are times when long vowels, short will become long will become short. There are times when high will become low will become high. They might move back and forth. In nouns, it's much less common. But we'll talk about how that works. But in verbs, you'll see, especially with the verb stem, which we'll get to, identifying the stem and classify all those different parts. We just need to know they can move back and forth on a line.
I never realized that every one of these pictures emphasizes that focal point you're talking about between the beach and the water.
Yeah, and these are Simshan posters. So I'll make a link for these posters. These come from British Columbia. There's posters on the wall that we're referring to.
Wait,
And we'll do some things with these posters over the course of the semester.
what can you tell me? Or is it?
Oh, they've got,
He knows where they come from. And
They have some channel.
Yeah, right there.
yeah, there's Simshan
And
language on
This
it.
There's the
building
floor
right there.
plans.
Yeah.
People's shirts too and hats.
Oh, so it's their style.
We just we talk about them. They're our relatives. We love them. They're doing all kinds of things that we would do.
They
Okay.
are beautiful people.
Yep. It's called the Seasonal Rounds poster. So
Yeah, you know what worries me about the confusion of that stuff, because I know some people get in on whether or not it's done by someone or if it's actually
Right.
just the style of it.
here, well, better repeat after me.
You.
Ah.
Uh-huh.
Ah. 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 A lot of times when I'm working on tone, you might hold your hand or your finger or something out. And this is, we've got it down by the table. This is low. We'll just do this with long vowels. Ah. 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 So, I had a student, and he liked to come in and practice writing sentences on the board. And we'd come in and we'd look at these sentences. And he liked to translate things. It was a lot of fun. And one time I was at an immersion room, and this guy he's like, I can translate any rap lyrics. And then he could. He was very good. And so he translated something like, I don't know where it comes from. I've been to the top of a mountain, a very tall mountain. Oh, Shah is mountain.
Oh, no.
Shah is women. Right? So he used the wrong, let's say, get your tone right. Because he turned really red when I said that's not.
That gets me, I work at the tram, that's what really annoys me every single day as I was going up the tram.
Yeah.
Shaw hit.
Shah hit. So,
On top of the mountain.
I think there are sounds in Tlingit that are challenging, but I think tone is probably the thing I would say. Make that your long-term focus. It's making sure you're getting it, whether it's high toned or low, long or short. Something I struggle with. I tend to just contract and make everything short.
I can't imagine when you having to shout at people, can tell the difference between the high and low on that.
Yeah. I guess you're shouting. Okay, so we're gonna.
When you go, okay, yeah, you just did it.
So we're gonna skip the tone part for now. We'll come back to that when we're looking at words. We're just gonna go back and forth, long and short. Eh, 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 a, the EI combination. A. Eh, 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 E, 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 O, 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 ooh, 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 ooh. This is a rare sound in Tlingit. Oh, 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 oh. The only place I really usually hear that on the coast is when people say, ho, ho. Right? They're two in a row. Sometimes you'll say them like a series of four. I saw Hajjati when he's giving a big speech. He started off with ho, 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 ho. And he said it like 4 times, right? So the number 4 pops up a lot in Tlingit oratory and culture. In the inland, I hear this sound more. Like there's this thing we say if somebody's like doing something and it's just too much. We might say hadla, right? Or we might just say dla. Or as we start losing more Tlingit, we say gla, which is not a Tlingit word. It comes from Tlingit. In the interior, a lot of speakers will say hado. That's how they would say that, and it ends with that O sound. So it's more common in the interior. So this is what we call sonorant endings. So if you put, when you see a W at the end of a word, what's going on is rounding. So what you're doing is your mouth is going to like a kissy face or like you're whistling, and that ends up rounding the word. It's a very important concept in Tlingit. The opposite of rounding would be the Y sound, which is pulling your mouth into smile or grimace. You know, if you're in these old-time Edward Curtis photos, you don't smile. You're just grimacing, getting ready to go to war. Ow. 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 I. You. 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 E. 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 Ooh. 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 We'll talk later about rounded endings, but they're important. One other thing that's important to do, like sometimes you'll see a word like yak, Y-A-A-K-W. Your brain sees the W at the end and knows you're supposed to end with this thing. And sometimes you'll, instead of going yak, you'll go yow. So you'll round it too soon, affecting that vowel. And I see this a lot when people say, and you hear that, where it should be, so that it's not affecting the vowel. So we pay attention to stuff like that. Now we got this dude whose head is cut in half, and he's okay with it. So this is the front. When I say front and back, this is where English primarily lives. This is where Tlingit primarily lives. Most everything is behind the teeth. And then a lot of things are getting up into this area, this part of the head, with some of your sound. When they say like back of the throat, this is really what they're talking about. Is this area in between your mouth and your nose, which is where it sounds like come from. So everybody practice snoring. Try to snore a lot. It's going to help you in this class. I snore every night. Makes my Tlingit better. And then there's the glottal thing down here. We'll talk about that. So we're going to run through these sounds and then we'll take a break. Everybody okay? You okay, guy? Line. Everybody good? Silence means yes. If any of these things deserve explanation, I will try my best to explain them. And there are a couple where speakers might have different interpretations of these words. I've never heard an inland speaker use masus in all reality, but I'm going to make them say masus because I think it's funny. It has my great cow joke, which I'm not going to tell you. I don't know if it's actually that great. Wasus.
Wasus.
Wa.
Masus.
So we're paying attention to tone, vowel length. The letter right here you're going to see is the first letter of the word. And so as we sort of think about how we would spell these things when we hear them, we're going to do a lot more spelling this year so that if somebody tells you something, you'll know how to write it down. The hardest thing to write down in the entire Tlingit universe is people's names. That's so hard. It's crazy. Okay, at least hard for me. Cheech.
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 Eat.
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 When we see this apostrophe, what is going on?
Pinched.
The airflow is stopping.
Say it again.
The airflow is stopping.
Yes. So your airflow is stopping. So what the apostrophe means, as far as when you think about, there's always these, I think there's a conscious and unconscious side to language learning, right? And you need the conscious side, like, I need to convince my body this is what we're doing. Then there's the unconscious side, where you just, if you walk around and you're just speaking Tlingit all the time to yourself, practicing, how would I say that? How would I say this? Well, I can name what that thing is. And then you're also listening to a lot of Tlingit. Your subconscious is going to put a lot of pieces together. So one of the things, when you see this apostrophe, it'll come at the end. There's two places it might come. Most commonly, it's going to come right after a consonant, which means when you make that particular consonant, you do so without using your lungs. So lungs on will have cha. Everybody go cha.
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 If we turn the lungs off and then back on, we get cha. 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 So your throat becomes a piston pushing that air out, and it's an important distinction. For example, wasa tu asauk equal Tlingit chenach. So we got a pinch and both consonants with a high, long vowel in the middle. So what we make sure is as we first start speaking Tlingit, people might go because it's hard to sort of get their body to do that. But we try to eliminate that gap. So that the consonant is coming out hard like it should, but it's also not creating an interruption. Okay. So okay. Da,
Da.
da,
Da.
glade,
Glade.
glade,
Glade.
zait,
Zait.
zait,
Zait.
janbu,
Janbu.
janbu,
Janbu.
yao da to a jinbu,
Jinbu.
jinbu,
Jinbu.
shush,
Shoosh.
shush,
Shoosh.
oog,
Oog.
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 So we're going to touch on these two sounds for a second. You get a little bit of variation between speakers, I think, with the L and also the pinched L is should there be some sort of ringing, vibrating sound in your mouth. And I think it varies from speaker to speaker. To make both of these sounds, you gotta have a lot of saliva on your tongue or around your tongue, especially for the second one. So there's two varieties I've seen of the second one. I think they're both just totally fine. These are fluent birth speakers that are making these sounds. One would be this sort of more ringing sort of a sound, which would go ooh, ooh, ooh. So to extend that sound, you've got
Kind of reminds me of Daffy Duck.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you need to run around screaming. You could, number 5 probably could be clinking. The other variety is a softer, more subtle sound, which would be ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh. They're both doing the same thing, which is compressing the tongue against the top of your mouth to push air out the sides, but it's a question of whether it's going or not. And I think it's fine. Whichever one sounds or feels best to you, especially as you go along, you say, well, it seems like speakers in my area do it more like this, I'll do it more. Noosk, 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 noosk. So there's that KW, that W at the end of a K or any variation of K or X is different than the ones, so we've got wah, wah, soos. You got your vocal cords moving during that. Here you got noosk. So instead of a K going k, you're going to go k. And that happens from rounding your mouth. And you're going to get a few words where that sound is right in the middle. For example, kshe, Kwsh, high toned E, kshe. And some speakers would say kushe, but a lot of speakers would say kshe. So it comes out kind of fast, and then the vocal cord comes off at the top. Seek, 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 speak, 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 speak. Your midterm should be to tell me a story that involves seek, speak, and seek. I mean, you kind of gotta have a daughter, or you can talk about somebody talking about their daughter. So seek would be like my daughter. Speak would be a black bear. Seek would be a belt. Well, maybe we could throw like it in there. Smoke, right? Throw them all in there.
Gosh.
Just make it like, tell me a story involving Shaw.
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 Tia.
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 Nice and short. Clay shoe.
Clay shoe.
Clay shoe.
Clay shoe.
When I say tia, what are the two parts of that word?
T and
T and So not every case, but majority of cases when a word ends with those two A's, and especially if there's just sort of a two-syllable word, the one before it is usually going to be a verb root. A verb root followed by which is a pronoun, which means the one or the ones. So this would be the one that chisels with a straight chisel. It's a chisel, of course it chisels. Then this word kleishlu, for some speakers it means butterfly. For some speakers it means moth. There's still probably some more. If somebody wanted to like take an investigation with fluent speakers, it would probably involve, I think that the areas that could use some work would be some bugs, some small birds, and some plants that don't necessarily get eaten or used on a regular basis. So some of that information is, what's that?
fungi.
Yeah.
flower.
Yeah, like different mushrooms, right? Like one name for mushroom is siushakatsaku, rain hats. Another one is kanatsakati, squirrel crackers. Astakati, cracker around the tree. And so, but there's probably even more words than that. And so,
What about the edible ones too?
echosaku,
What's the boo?
yeah, right? As king bolitas or whatever, those are pretty yummy.
Chicken of the leg.
Oh.
And so, basically, and we'll get to nouns, we'll talk about how Tlingit nouns have come into being and what we can learn about our language by looking at them. Moving on. E. 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 So this sound comes out faster than the pinched L. So we would have oog, e. So, you know, we'll just practice those sounds and looking at them. Saw,
So,
saw,
Saw.
tat-e,
Tat-e.
tat-e,
Tat-e.
yak,
Yak.
yak,
Yak.
gooch,
Gooch.
gooch,
Gooch.
cost,
Cost.
cost,
Cost.
incheyi,
Incheyi.
incheyi,
Incheyi.
khasha,
Khasha.
khasha,
Khasha.
ah,
Ag.
ah.
Ag.
Now we get into fun territory. We're getting into some sneakier sounds, as Richard Dowenhauer liked to call them. Guasha,
Guasha.
guasha,
Guasha.
that's the way guasha.
Stab.
To stab or to beat.
Oh yeah,
You
like
would
you can
wash your
howl,
drum.
Yeah.
You can gouache somebody in the face.
Click, click,
If,
click.
you know,
Gouache.
what's that?
Click, click. Click, click, gouache.
Gouache, I'm gonna hit it. Somebody saying something online?
The way that I've heard in the inland, actually from Sam Johnson for dagger, would be a guashna.
Say it one more time.
Guashna with the N.
Guashna. Interesting.
Yeah.
Guashna.
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 With an N.
That's for a dagger.
Wearing one around my neck. What it was.
Huh.
Thought I'd mention that.
Goodness, cheesh. I'll certainly see if I could figure out more about that. There is one thing. There are two known speakers who made substitutions. One is Susie James. The other is Bert Dennis. So if there was ever an area where there was an N sound, N, like news, they would often put a voiced L in there, which is a sound that really doesn't exist in Tlingit. So it's a lusk, or instead of uhan, you would hear uhal. So yeah, I like talking about different variations that you'll hear. Guashna. I don't know why the N would be there, so it's really interesting. But maybe it's to provide separation between a dagger and something to, like a drum beater, they'll usually call gao guashi, is how I've often heard it, which is the thing that hits the drum. So in Tlingit, like banging on something and stabbing something, the same. Don't stab your drum. Beat on the drum. Chish. On Quegi.
On Quegi.
On Quayi.
On
Quayi. Yak.
Ya.
Yak.
Ya.
Ya.
What?
Quat.
What?
Zisk.
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 First time I've realized right now that quat and zisk are right next to each other, which is hilarious because why? Quat is the word you would use for the moose's testicles. So that's just a total coincidence. I'm not trying to suggest anything by that.
Are you sure?
Kunz. So kunz is a potato, quat is an egg. They're also the term you would use usually for a caribou or moose in particular. I don't know.
Shuggins.
What's that? Oh, shakunz. Yeah, potato head.
Grandma used to say it all the time.
Yeah, shakunz. Yeah, that one. There's a lot of people who get that as a nickname. Hwasta. 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 Ga. 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 Khwan. 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 Z.
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 Ouch.
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 My favorite description as far as teaching this sound is people pretend to drink water and they make that sound. That's where that sound comes from. Cuck.
Cuck.
Cuck. Cuck. Cuck. Cuck. A cave.
A cave.
A cave.
A cave.
A cave.
A cave.
Chad.
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 Another good example of paying attention to your vowels. I had a student who did this awesome video project and basically took a video promotion for the Alaska Marine Highway and then redubbed it with Tlingit. It was amazing. There were some brown bears eating fish, which would be chad acha wechutz. He accidentally said chat acha wechutz. So instead of saying the bears are eating fish, the bears are eating me. So you're awfully calm about that one. Pay attention. All right. What's that?
The dog's in the house.
No. Oh. I don't name names when I tell about. They're just anonymous students. On. Quena. Quan. So one thing we'll talk about this semester is nouns that need to belong to something. And the way that that works in Tlingit is there's something immediately before it, right? So you'd say Ut Quan, people of Ut. You might say Yakdat Quan, Ak Quan, Ak Quan. And so the way that we're starting to list these nowadays, in the past it would have before it, which means it's, right? It's the people of it. Quan translates to the people of whatever's before it. So the way we're doing this now, and same with, for example, kinship terms, you would, in the dictionary, you would usually see du tla, du ish, du art. The way that we're starting to enter these is with a long dash, and that way there'd be a dash here, and you just know it needs to belong to something, and there's different ways you can use that. Sorry. Last couple of pages. Na,
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 quack,
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 quack, slab,
slave,
slab,
slave,
slab,
slave,
shanachwayi,
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 duhunch,
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 quad,
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 neck,
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 yana eight,
Yana 8,
yana eight,
Yana 8,
hit,
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 What is Yana age?
yana eight. It's called wild celery or Indian
Stuff
celery.
that grows real tall and then dries out. And
It gets real woody. Cow parsnip. It's usually about 3 feet tall.
Yeah,
4
I've seen
feet
it around
tall.
university, I just didn't know what it was.
You see it around a lot.
Yeah, it's edible. You can
It's
get
edible.
in the spring though. And then in the fall they make perfect spitball shoes.
Is that the one if you touch it in the summer, you get a really bad burn?
Yeah, so not everybody, but a lot of
It doesn't have
people,
to be.
if the juice from inside the plant gets on your skin and then the sun shines on it, then it has a reaction and you can blister really bad.
Is that the one that we
Depends on
looked
how much you
through?
eat.
No, that's tziksh.
Oh.
We'll talk about tziksh. So yana 8, duchayi at talk ite, ye away to wasaku, ya ye kukinki duchawu at yituwasaku ya duchawu just yeast at akayandu ne. Wash itching tundatane poa kushakutsi away. Yana 8 has to do it in. So you get it in the spring. I think you get it before the hairs start to change color. I've been told you get it on a cloudy day because then you're less likely to have it impact you and you're careful. And you want to peel off that outside layer a lot of times before you. But yeah, it's very. And then iksh is a very, very poisonous plant. It'll kill you.
False hellebores?
False hellebores. They call inach. Yataqa akha di awa. Ya awa haska wakhot. Aqa ayikt aya. Nauk. Nauk aya. Ya has awsanich. As the shin. So yikt aqa qnach aw shitsikwa. Hachu. Yes, the cut in Nigu, I get was it shoot duck, yeah, our just Kadane out to the coup, Kadane a yaut to a yaut coup, a duck a ye when they yet the koa Tlingit the tani. What? Yeah, yes, has just yeah, yes. Yes, kutak. Yes, ayay satin. Te'ekuch sati. Ako eksh tunach aya kiyitiz. Heshwasaka kwati. Ya, one panis kaayo, kekak inach binoculars, teksh yedu wasalko. There's a plant called iksh, which has a very powerful medicine in the roots if you were to grind it up, but you should talk to somebody who really knows about it if you were to do something like that. The plant is very poisonous, it can kill you, but it is also the plant. There are several things in Tlingit that Tlingits would believe would turn you to stone. Looking at raven, like not like just any raven, but like raven from the stories. And also the eclipse might turn you to stone if you stare at it. But if you looked through these things, you would be fine. And so it's sometimes used as the word for binoculars, but not by very many speakers. Yeah, I think that's all I know about. Skookum root is what they call it as well, when it's made into medicine. People in Prince of Wales know quite a bit about it.
Kind of like a spiritual plant, really spiritual plant too.
Yeah, I think who made that song about it, or a chant, maybe it was Zeus, and it was calling it the spirit helper of the Devil's Club. Zacht. Very powerful. Yeah.
The description.
All right, break time. 7 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Back in 7 minutes.
Okay, the vending machines around here for snacks.
There's a vending machine if you want highlighters.
Cafeteria should be open. Right
Yeah, if you want to get a highlighter. I think they close at
How they
6:30
taste?
Cafeteria did?
or 6 even.
What?
I think it goes at 6.
Yeah.
6, yeah.
René,
That's the way.
I'm terrible at jokes.
there's Barbara and we're finishing up the conference. So for that Thursday night class, we should.
Okay, you're cutting out pretty bad. My
Oh,
patient is Thursday nights. You might be able to teleconference in Whitehorse.
no, for the clan conference that's coming up in October.
Oh,
Clan conference in October. We're applying to go to it, so we might actually be able to be there in.
conference, so they might be nothing. Okay, so yeah, there's this weird like lag when you're talking.
There's a clean
The clan conference is here in Juneau at the end of October. You might come early, so you can come to class. You can be here for a class. Kunachike, yeah, we have to wasaku. Cheesh. We have to figure out the audio situation. I don't know if it's the connection you have. That would be my guess.
Those almonds over there.
Because it's, I can hear it, it sounds a little robotic.
It's kind of beat up.
You took one of these too. I just got back from Seattle and I bought a whole bunch of stuff from Chinatown.
Oh, did you go to Wajimaya?
Pike Place Market and stuff, so yes, yes.
love Wajimaya.
I like was in there for so long, my aunt was videotaping
When is
my
the-
reaction of things. She was just like, your mom's gonna love this.
When is the Alaskan Studies Conference?
April.
April?
In Anchorage.
I don't even know what that is.
Banana key de guanchke. Beat it up.
Okay.
It's really good.
Spent
They
time
have
in
in
my
the-
car.
Oh.
So maybe I
Like
did
jars or something.
There's all kinds of stuff. The little this black thing though, that's black licorice. That is nothing
That
to
looks
do
like
with
you put it in your dishwasher.
I don't know what that is. I just bought it. It was in like candy stuff.
This looks good. You have this.
I'm so interested when it comes to Asian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Already?
I thought it was gonna be like a Rice Krispie treat.
Is it savory?
Soy sauce.
Yeah.
Okay, that's, okay. I'm gonna choose this lemon.
But it's very,
Where's that? That's not lemon.
I don't know what that is.
all flavors are just like lemon.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's lemon? Okay, I'm gonna eat it.
These things, these little red ones are watermelon.
For what?
They're watermelon gummies. I don't know those. They're
I like the flaky gummies I saw at Walmart. Those are good.
It was crazy though. I hadn't been to Seattle since I was like 8, so I didn't really remember anything. And it was just an overstimulus
huge.
of everything, yeah. So now coming back here, I'm like,
You can get anything you want.
yeah, and everything is small here now, and I'm just like, all right, well, Juneau's no big deal.
I miss downtown Seattle.
It was so cool.
You can walk everywhere,
God,
but
I
take
lived there
the
for a while.
around.
Yeah.
It's not-
It was so cool.
I like it, but I couldn't live there again.
I'm going to go there, I think in October.
PFD. PFD time.
I'm gonna get a tattoo.
Watch
on
them,
you.
watch them play the Lions.
What's his name, Nahan? Tattoo.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm gonna get Dave to tattoo me, but I already have an appointment for the 25th. See it?
Tattoo.
Yeah, Coco dead. Oh, yeah. Would it be like to obtain it? You'd probably just say, or Coco Achduk, Kakwaska. Yeah, she is going to tattoo this.
Kind of a random story, but the English. Pretty short.
I think I went to Chinatown. These little chibi things are
Yeah,
fun.
I'm sorry,
They're
that's
flavor
rough.
fun. I think it's blueberry and a raspberry thing.
Oh my god. Soy sauce flavor.
Yeah, that's another
Where's
easy
it
thing. The black thing is licorice.
I like it. That's totally two different.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Yes, sir.
It was driving
Similar
Gary.
story.
I don't know.
Ever hear anything like that? I think it got cut off. I think it's supposed to. I think they're supposed to.
Who's this?
I don't know. That's David Fox.
Super sweet.
With really sour too.
I've heard of like things like this. But it's some high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, where is it? You just got interesting things. Yeah. Where Take a good day.
No, I wouldn't recommend that. Don't ever eat that.
Goot, something goot.
Kick Badroot. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
That's what I saw, of course.
Chagutsa. Chagudesa. Wherever.
Or good day.
Good decide to which cooking.
Oh, and that's what I forgot. So,
Decide to which cooking.
I was reading that the interrogative words thing by that guy.
Seth?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really cool. I enjoy it.
awesome. Yeah, this stuff is good.
I don't know if you meant, because last year you said about the bugs and the spiders and all that.
right.
So one year I had all of these guys were not on the heater. I've never seen that huddled together, but they huddled together.
They do.
Wow.
They're not too scary.
Have you ever seen that group?
I'm not too scared of
people
spiders
on
anymore.
Facebook who
Yeah, I don't
kill all nine.
I mean, I'll kill a spider if it's in the shower with
There's
me.
this group of people
That's
who are
too
out
much.
of town.
There's a certain amount. You are allowed to exist, just don't get too close to me.
They live in one in the middle
Too
of
vulnerable.
winter, and that's where the daddy long legs go.
Yeah.
Because it's so cold
Oh, yeah,
outside.
so
They
you
go in
kill
the
them,
caves.
is the show.
They took a video and
Yeah,
it's
you don't
they're
kill them,
crawling.
they're dead.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This was just seven.
You're just
Thousands.
You're evolving them.
Yeah. Best of not kill it. So I think, whatever reason, since I've adapted that philosophy, I'm running
Moth. Mainly the yellow and black.
Well, leave them alone, just don't get too close to
Those are
me.
big moths, and I've got a picture of
Very
them. Yeah.
I know I stepped on one the other day.
I've got a picture of that.
Some problems, like it was incidental, like I could have like easily got away, I just hear it, just like, no. Oh,
Speakers and see.
I'll kill flies. I won't kill a spider.
How do you spell Ayakoheyaku? Is it?
Gook. That's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't have to be there unless it's it. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So will be a separate word. A. And then
K underline.
yak.
K.
Wa.
Oh,
Y-A-K.
not underlined. G underlined. W-A.
Hey.
H-E-I.
Hi, Tom.
Y-A-A. Okay.
Y-A underline G.
Underline. Yuck. Yuck. Hey. Yuck. Is it? I don't think it's underlined. The last.
I don't think the other one, last one's underlined.
No.
Because when Kalu says it, it doesn't sound underlined to me, but maybe.
Oh, really? Yeah, I think.
Maybe I'm wrong there.
No, I think it is, but I think it's probably fallen off because it's a verb. Yakwa, that's a future form of a verb. You can say it with a kakwa in there. Yakwa means, for example.
I think De Laguna wrote about it in her Beyonce Elias, and she said that it comes from a word that means like returning.
Really?
Something that returns. And I don't know what the last part of the verb was, but that's how she interpreted it.
So this part of the verb, so here it is. Ya, gu, u, ka. Let me share this.
Yeah.
Not this. Only have
And I think Sergei Kahn writes about it in Circuit. Writes about it in Symbolic Immortality.
Oh, yeah. So this is, that's the suffix, I think. But we're kind of just speculating. I'm talking with Zeosh about this, because it's like it's gonna be a verb built in there. But if it's the verb, then the hey needs to be root. And then it's rarely used suffix, which means to dwindle away.
Oh.
But you see, for most speakers, I think they would just say and they wouldn't have the on there. So I think it could be spelled either way. I think most of the times you're going to spell it without the language.
Where's it?
And then it will move towards dwindling to nothing.
Okay, cool.
But I think it's one of those cases where, regardless of what the literal interpretation, the cultural, that's where the meaning is found. It's not necessarily because Tlingit likes to just stack all these different components up, and then they smush together. And then like this one, Yana'atani, is the lid for something. And you've got all these variations because it has these two sounds that are no longer in Tlingit. Was in this word. And it's the same one you see in Henya, Nanya, Sanya. And it means like lace. Yeah, and so you'll see it in certain things, but it's sort of fallen out of use. And so there's a couple things that have fallen out of use in Tlingit, but it's good to know about them so that when you look at words, you can understand like why are there so many ways to say lid, and it's because those sounds just are present. Okay. Everybody okay? You okay, guys?
Covering earlier. The word kincheyi, is that a general word for flower?
for flower, that's the way flower should get kaya. Eka Oh yeah, we had a Eka Queen last semester. So, Eka Queen is also a verb. So there are many nouns in Tlingit that are also verbs. E is interchangeable for the most part, but not the exact same thing as. So there's e and e. But those are pretty much the same thing. But if it's one, then it'll always be that one. So there might be a subtle variation. But there's a couple of things you're going to see. One is a lot of times it's going to be e, like X underline apostrophe high tone E. That's my mouth. And that might become when it moves into being embedded in a verb. So Tlingit verbs like to embed a bunch of things in the front of them. Could be mouths, could be, and a mouth in Tlingit is an opening, right? You have a and you have a and you have a tuk. Right? It's just an opening. A whoosh, the door, or the doorway. Kahat, the cover on the opening. A kahwain is for something to blossom or to open. That's what a flower. That's the word for flower.
A or
The a kahwain. So the kahwain is the part that has. But the has to be on there because it's like a mouth. Like if you think of a flower and how it opens, it is. So it looks like initially like a mouth open, and then it sort of blossoms. So that's the word for flower. In Cheyi is specifically a wild rose, I think is what they call it. It's got 5 petals. In Cheyi, Keku is the rose hip. It's edible. You got to peel off the outside, I think, or else you get. For me, I got a really itchy mouth. Anything else? So as we go through these lessons, it's really important that you're visualizing these things. I would recommend printing out this workbook so that you can keep it with you, so that you can look at it. We're certainly looking at it as we go through the screen, but to have it on your own, and that you're thinking of these things. But there's got to be these 2 parts. So I think the conscious part is you're looking at it, and you're thinking about, is that the word for this or that as well? But then the unconscious part is you're making your brain make a new association. So you say news, Wolverine. Instead you say news. And you look at that image, and your brain knows that when you see that thing, news. And I think something that helps you in your Tlingit speech is you just start retiring the English words for some of these things. And I think the world around us can just live with that. So if we say chashakat enough times, people are going to know what we're talking about. Right? It's not going to ruin English. So now that we're going to go.
Can we pretend it's rude by itself.
I read this article the other day, I got a little grumpy, and it's talking about, anybody can be endangered, anybody can go through a hard time.
What if we want to ruin English?
So on the east coast of one of the Carolinas, I forget which one, there's a little community that at one time spoke a type of English that's much more similar, I think, to what they speak in England. They had very specific ways of talking about it. It was its own dialect of English. And there's an argument now that it's opened up to tourism, but now the kids aren't speaking like that anymore. They're speaking sort of American type of English. Generic, I guess, East Coast American English. And they're trying to, the article I read was trying to compare that to endangered languages. And it even pointed to a tribe who had lost their language and now speak a different dialect of English. And it was just a hard article for me to read and not be like, but everybody has a place. They can make their arguments. I don't align myself because and it's a big deal if you're from there, right? If you're from there and people speak a certain way and they stop speaking a certain way, it can really impact you. But I think it's a totally different level than indigenous languages and what they're facing. Because if people stop speaking that, they're still speaking English, right? I mean, they can still communicate.
And English is a
Sit
weird
those
language.
people down with any other people who speak English, and they get conversations. So when you take the language away, it's like,
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and but it creates an interesting sort of discussion point.
I swear, I think that article just came from stand-up, hearing from a guy named Eddie Izzard. He had that concept on that too. Because he was talking about like the difference between Robin Hood, British Robin Hood and American Robin Hood. It was crazy just hearing a British guy trying to have an American accent.
Yeah, so you've got different types of, different dialects of English. And again, when you think about dialects, sometimes it's pronunciation, car or ka, and wikita, right? And sometimes it's the ways that you phrase things, right? So I went to Minnesota, I went to college in Minnesota, and people were like, hey, we won them last night. I'm like, you did? You didn't beat them? And so, or they say, can you borrow me some money? I'm like, oh, yeah, but I knew what they meant, right? It's just
You want me to go to the
different
bank and?
Right, exactly, yes. It's
I just realized I've been doing that my whole life. Like 2 weeks ago, can I borrow some money? What? Everyone looked at me like I'm all weird.
Or they'd say, can you borrow me some money? That's how people would ask me, can you borrow me some money?
I asked someone that, and they held out their hand like I was going to give them money. I got so confused.
And so and then you get this we tease some of our inland friends who say process as opposed to process, or
They do say things differently.
they're right here.
Only slightly.
Well, we do like a shot.
But
I like the way you pronounce it.
Our boat and boot.
Oh, a boot.
Let's go into the
See, that's
boot.
getting into deep, like it's different realms of Canada. Like not everybody in Canada would speak that.
Mexicans and Spanish. When they say Spanish, go como estás. Well, Mexican dialect, como estás.
Yeah, and there's different like Barcelona and Barcelona. With that, that's the tongue come out when you're making that S sound, and then you have lisps. Which is fun because like I raised my kids with Tlingit, right? I only speak Tlingit to my kids. And it's funny because both of them for a long time would say, I think, like for I think. That's really fun because like the kids have Tlingit names. They get Tlingit names first, and then they get their other names. And so Kaja was born, and we're putting him in the car. And she said something, and I said, Iktu Darian. And I said his English name. She said, I think Kaja. So she was rejecting his English name and using this fun variety of Shingish. And we were watching a Kanansak, and I was talking to them about this Kanansak running around between the trees and the fence. And she said, wait to him. That's pretty fun.
One thing I was reminded of, someone was in the same situation. I say flag, not flog. I don't understand. I don't hear it still, but he says I say flag really weird.
Flag?
Like flag, like a flag.
Flag, like FLAIG.
Yeah,
Flag? Oh,
like flag. Yeah,
flag.
flag.
With an E.
A flag. Flag.
Flag.
Oh,
Flog. Yeah, flag.
I think you're saying flog.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't hear it. I don't know what you guys are telling me. It's so weird. Chill out.
There's also that
Flag.
other flag,
Flog.
general language.
What?
Fleeg.
Conniving.
Oh, well, with some names, like there's people who are Knudsen, and there are people who are Knudsen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just depends. Anyways, enough about English. You guys online? Everybody okay? Everybody want to defend Canadian English?
Not agree.
We're not making fun of it.
Sorry. Sorry.
here we go. So we're focusing on asking questions in Tlingit. There are a few ways to ask questions in Tlingit. The two sort of basic, what are the two basic ways of asking questions? Yeah, so you're adding a question particle with sa, right? And we'll look at these different ways. And then what's the other one? Get, right? Yeah, exactly. So get. So putting get in there. And sometimes the get might go in different places in the phrase. And what does get turn it into?
A yes or no question.
A yes or no question. You can also signal doubt. So sometimes gwash can turn things into a question as well. So I might say, maybe you need water. And there's probably a question mark on there. But the one thing we don't do in Tlingit is we turn, and it was interesting because, you want water. You want water? Right, so those are two, there's the question mark on one and the second one, right? Ron Burgundy, right? So we get the Ron Burgundy effect in English, we don't have in Tlingit. So you have pig in it. I do this all the time. And so I was visiting with Pechne, and I said, what's that tea? She's like, what's that tea? Yeah, that. And so we keep it in mind, turn things into questions. We use particles in Tlingit. That's how we take care of it. In Hawaiian, it goes up and then back down. I can't think of a particular Hawaiian question, but it takes care of it with tone. Don't change the structure of the sentence itself. And same with, and sometimes English does, but it's not working.
How does it work when it's a delivery question?
What's that?
Oh, just those weird basic commands like das, yeah.
Yeah, so da is what, right? And it also gets into weird interpretation and how the language functions. Languages don't function the same. So you could say, wasa atwune. That's what happened. Yeah, what happened? So a lot of speakers, and I'll say, wasa eduasa, right? And so a lot of speakers would say, no, wa is what. Wa is not how. But the literal sort, and so sometimes we can have the literal translation that is not always the same as what it means in the language. So we'll talk about that kind of stuff a lot too. Wananisawe. That's you see that one a lot in oratory. We have these sort of debates about it over the summer. And there weren't really debates, it was just sort of trying to figure out how it works. Wananisawe, even though that's phrased as sort of a question in Tlingit, it means at some point. At some point, ravens stopped eating blueberries. Right? So we'll talk about how these things function. But that will, where am I going? I don't know how to drive. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit more interactive thing for these last 15 minutes because you might be sitting there and maybe you think, well, I don't have to say these things, or, we said them all together at first, so now you're going to say them individually. So I'll say the word, don't repeat it, everybody. I'll say it, and then we'll just send it around, going around like the sun. Okay? So we're still focused on nouns. That's all we're doing right now is just practicing these nouns, looking at these pictures. So when we see these things in life, we'll call them by their real names. Okay, you want it?
Which one is east?
Huh?
Which one is east? Or if we're going around like the sun, who goes first?
Okay. So which one is east? I don't know. Okay, so we've got Kainach, Dachnach, Naskinach, Kuninach, Kijinach. So after the fifth person, we will switch to online, starting with Kubuch. And then, Barbara, can you tell me your Tlingit name again?
Yan Kakla.
Yan Katla.
Yan Kakla.
Yan Katla.
Yahweh.
Goodness, sheesh. So when we go online, you were number 2. Carol, we were working on your Tlingit name. Feel free to choose a nickname in the meantime if you would like. And then Tukaha, and then we come back into the classroom. So our first word, and again, we're each taking a turn as an individual. Atdaye.
Atdaye.
Sorry. Atdaye.
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 Kuwuch.
Atdaye.
Okay. And Kachtla.
Atdaye.
Atdaye.
Okay. I didn't hear you, but I assume your pronunciation was perfect.
Atdaye.
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 Okay.
Atdaye.
Hellechwaach.
Atdaye.
Okay. Atdaye.
Atdaye.
Tas.
Tas.
Das.
Tas.
Tas.
Kuwuch.
Tas.
Tas.
Tus.
Tuss.
Okay.
Tus.
Tus.
Tas.
Tas.
Shawat.
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 Show what?
Shawat.
Kuwuch.
Shawat.
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 Okay.
Shawat.
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 Ah.
Uh.
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 Ah.
Ichte.
Ichte. Ichte.
Ichte.
Ichte.
Ichte.
Ichte.
Echte.
Echte.
Ichte.
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 Okay, we gotta pause for a second. So there is an X, and there is an underline X. What does an X sound like? What does an underline X sound like? So now I'm going to make a Tlingit word. It goes X, underline X, X, underline X. Right? So make sure when you see this word, you're saying ichte. You're not saying ichte. So we control when we go into X. I can hear myself. X. I can hear myself. Okay, next one. Te.
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 Okay.
Time out. Getting kachla, we're getting
It must have been all the.
Sorry, I'm going to mute you for a second. Hopefully we're able to unmute when we come back to you. Every now and then we get caught in like a weird loop, so we'll just sort of keep an eye on it, figure out what might be causing the loop. Okay, we were still on.
One left. No.
I do something.
I think,
Everybody down here said.
Ted.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, yeah, sure. Ted.
Cheesh. Saved.
Saved.
Say.
Seat.
Sate.
It was like a beaded pattern. It was all like.
Say it.
Incredible, thank you.
Eight.
Saved.
Saved.
Saved. Okay, and Yen Kachla, are you able to unmute yourself? I'm not exactly sure what happens when I mute.
This is a quick.
We should all just like make a.
Say.
Okay, we're gonna have to just. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but we'll keep you muted, unfortunately, until we figure it out.
And Tlingit, you say it and spread.
That's
how I remember.
That's pretty good. Although, we keep in mind that this word saved is one vowel. Okay, so we don't, because sometimes we see it and we end up going say it. So we do that, say it. Saved. Saved. Yeah. Sa, ut. It's these two words, sa and ut. Everybody, you see, like kind of the very top, I think it's, if you go to the top of your, what do you call this thing? Sternum. On the top of your sternum, right, on the top of your chest bone, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, because I mean, I swear.
Doesn't reach all the way to the top.
At the base of your neck, the base of your neck,
Oh, this thing.
there's a little dent right there.
Right where your cloud.
That's to get the nurses in there. Across the way.
You're a biologist.
What? Fulcrum. There's some word for it. I've got it. Anyways.
That's easy.
Everybody you got a little dent there where your neck meets your chest area. This is what we call sa. Sa. Or se. You're going to see this a lot. It's a body part. Sa. It's kind of difficult to interpret, but you're going to see a lot of nouns, sate, sa'at, the thing, this part thing. I don't know how we're going to translate that. What are we going to call this?
We should just call it
yeah, the sa thing. There we go.
Yeah.
You're going to see it in nouns as well. So when I said kesh ikhwa ach, I should say kesh esachwa ach. I don't hear you. Right? So if I think you're speaking too quietly, I might say kesh esachwa ach. The equivalent's like sometimes I'm sitting with my daughter who's 4 and she's right next to me, but she still feels like she has to yell when she talks. I might say kudach echeshkau. You're too loud, or iseshkau. So when you see it pop up in the verb sa, it usually is referring to a voice. So for example, if you heard somebody creeping around in your house, you might say Hwa'ach. But if you hear somebody talking, Sachwa'ach. So those are the slight variations on that and how you're going to see it. And you're going to see lots of things that happen. Sadatai is, it warms around this area. That's the Tlingit word for scarf. Saka'at is a necktie thing on the sa. Sakate is a dance apron, or sometimes it would be like a bib for like a kid. And that is another variation of thing on the sa. Okay. Sheye.
Sheye.
Whoa.
Sheye.
Oh, it's my turn now?
Mhm.
Okay. Shade.
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 Sheye.
Shady.
Shady.
Okay.
Shay.
Shady.
Shady.
Shade.
Shade.
Sheye.
Shade.
Okay. And then for some speakers in Sitka, this could also just mean any type of tree. Tikitkiya.
Tikitkiya.
Tikitkiya. Tikit.
Tikitkiya.
Tikit.
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 Kiya.
Kia.
Tigitkiya.
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 Tikitkiya.
Thank you.
Kasha Sachwa'ach. Ikvasa. Gook. Okay, gook. Somebody gook day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tikitkiya.
Yeah.
Tigitkiya.
Tikitkiya.
Tikitkiya. Ikecha. When it's changed to cut you on, which way Khana has thinking to Hatangish to Tushtu. Tatke Koa.
Already?
Khosatin Kachanades. Yakunach Kaki at Kachanades. Gook translate. Tatke Khosatin Kachanades.
These, oh yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday.
You saw
That's the way Kachanades.
Seagull.
It is a kingfisher. So I'm over by the dump. Adik Sahaye. Yeah, goodness cheese. See you guys on Thursday. We'll pick up where we left off, and we'll try and pick up the pace. Maybe we'll see. And always, if you think of questions, just let me know, and we'll start class with things that are on your mind. Dasa? Dasa? Okay. Ikecha, goodness cheese,